The foundation of self-determination and achievement rests on a fundamental principle. Your life outcomes are primarily determined by the actions you take and the responsibility you assume for those actions. This concept establishes that external circumstances, while influential, are not the ultimate determinants of success. Instead, it's the decisions you make, the initiatives you pursue, and your willingness to own both victories and failures that shape your trajectory toward financial prosperity, influence, and autonomy. This foundation matters because it shifts the locus of control from external forces to internal agency. When individuals recognize that execution and personal responsibility are within their control, they move from a victim mentality to an empowered position. This mindset transformation is critical because waiting for perfect conditions, blaming circumstances, or expecting others to create opportunities leads to stagnation, while taking ownership generates momentum. Consider Oprah Winfrey, who grew up in poverty and faced numerous adversities, but refused to let circumstances define her future. She took responsibility for her development, executed relentlessly on her vision, and built a media empire. Similarly, countless entrepreneurs have started businesses with minimal resources by executing on ideas rather than waiting for ideal conditions. A software developer who learns coding after work hours and launches a freelance business demonstrates how execution and responsibility translate directly into increased income and freedom. However, this philosophy faces legitimate criticism. Critics argue it can oversimplify systemic barriers like poverty, discrimination, and lack of access to education or capital. Not everyone starts from the same baseline, and emphasizing personal responsibility without acknowledging structural inequalities can appear tone-deaf. Others contend that excessive focus on individual action ignores the role of luck, timing, and inherited advantages in success. Nevertheless, this foundation connects intimately with every aspect of achieving money, power, and freedom. Financial success requires executing business strategies and taking responsibility for financial decisions. Power comes from demonstrating capability through consistent action. Freedom is earned by taking ownership of choices rather than remaining dependent on others. This introductory concept establishes the operating principle that threads through all subsequent discussions. While circumstances vary, the response to those circumstances remains your responsibility, and execution on that responsibility is the mechanism that transforms potential into reality. The concept of execution serving as the ultimate differentiator centers on the reality that ideas, plans, and strategies hold minimal value without implementation. In the context of achieving money, power, and freedom, execution separates dreamers from achievers. While countless people share similar aspirations and even develop sophisticated strategies, only those who consistently take action transform their circumstances. This principle emphasizes that knowledge without application remains theoretical, and potential without activation stays dormant. The significance of this concept lies in its direct challenge to passive approaches toward success. Many individuals invest considerable time planning, learning, and preparing, but fail to bridge the gap between intention and action. Execution becomes the catalyst that converts abstract goals into tangible results, making it indispensable for anyone seeking financial independence, influence, or autonomy. Consider the entrepreneur who spends years perfecting a business plan versus the one who launches an imperfect product and iterates based on real market feedback. The latter typically achieves success faster because they're learning through doing. Similarly, fitness enthusiasts who obsessively research optimal workout routines but never consistently train remain unchanged, while those who simply show up daily and execute basic exercises transform their bodies. Research on implementation intentions and action-oriented mindsets supports this philosophy. Studies demonstrate that individuals who focus on execution rather than prolonged planning achieve goals more reliably. The bias toward action creates momentum, generates real-world data, and builds the skills necessary for sustained success. However, critics argue this perspective can oversimplify success by downplaying the importance of strategic planning, timing, and structural advantages. Reckless execution without direction can waste resources and create unnecessary failures. Some situations genuinely require extensive preparation before action, particularly in high-stakes environments. Additionally, systemic barriers mean execution alone may not guarantee success for everyone equally. This principle fundamentally connects to personal responsibility because it eliminates excuses. When execution becomes the priority, external circumstances become less relevant than individual agency. It reinforces that waiting for perfect conditions, complete knowledge, or external permission delays progress indefinitely. By focusing on what can be controlled, taking consistent action, individuals reclaim power over their trajectory, directly advancing their pursuit of financial success, influence, and personal freedom. Execution is the disciplined practice of converting abstract ideas, plans, and intentions into concrete, measurable outcomes. It's the bridge between what you envision and what actually exists in the world. While countless people have brilliant ideas, execution separates dreamers from achievers. It involves taking consistent action, making decisions under uncertainty, and persisting through obstacles until something tangible materializes. This concept is foundational to acquiring money, power, and freedom because the marketplace rewards results, not potential. The significance of execution cannot be overstated. Ideas alone have zero market value until implemented. Someone who executes a mediocre idea will almost always surpass someone with a genius concept who never acts. Execution demonstrates commitment, builds credibility, and creates the feedback loops necessary for improvement. It's through execution that you develop skills, establish reputation, and generate the resources that compound into wealth and influence. Consider Sarah Blakely, who founded Spanx with just $5,000 and an idea for footless pantyhose. She didn't have fashion industry connections or manufacturing expertise, but she executed relentlessly researching patents herself, cold calling manufacturers, and personally pitching buyers at Neiman Marcus. Her execution transformed a simple concept into a billion-dollar empire. Similarly, look at any successful entrepreneur who launched a minimum viable product rather than waiting for perfection. They gathered real customer feedback, iterated quickly, and built momentum through action rather than endless planning. However, execution faces legitimate challenges. There's the action without strategy trap, where people confuse busy work with productive execution. Critics argue that reckless execution wastes resources and that proper planning prevents poor performance. Additionally, systemic barriers like lack of access to capital, education, or networks can make execution significantly harder for some individuals, suggesting that execution alone isn't always sufficient without addressing structural inequalities. Execution connects directly to personal responsibility because it requires acknowledging that you, not circumstances, luck, or others, must make things happen. This mindset shift from passive waiting to active creating is what generates freedom. Each successful execution builds confidence, competence, and capital. It creates a virtuous cycle where results from one execution fund and inform the next, progressively expanding your capabilities and options. Without execution, responsibility remains theoretical, but with it, you become the architect of your own circumstances. The concept that execution and personal responsibility serve as the sole pathways to achieving money, power, and freedom represents a foundational belief in meritocratic achievement and self-determination. This perspective emphasizes that taking concrete action on your ideas while fully owning the outcomes of your decisions creates the momentum necessary for success. Rather than relying on external circumstances, luck, or inherited advantages, this philosophy argues that individuals must actively execute their plans and accept complete accountability for results to advance in life. This principle matters because it shifts the locus of control from external factors to internal agency. When people embrace execution over endless planning and accept responsibility rather than blaming circumstances, they develop the resilience and decision-making capabilities that wealth building and influence require. Without execution, even brilliant ideas remain worthless. Without personal responsibility, individuals remain trapped in victim mentality that prevents growth. Consider Elon Musk, who repeatedly executed on ambitious visions despite skepticism, personally guaranteeing loans and investing his own capital into Tesla and SpaceX when both companies nearly collapsed. His willingness to take full responsibility for potential failure enabled breakthrough success. Similarly, Oprah Winfrey transformed personal trauma into purposeful action, taking responsibility for her growth and executing a media empire from modest beginnings rather than remaining defined by her difficult childhood. Supporters of this viewpoint argue that execution separates dreamers from achievers, while personal responsibility creates the psychological foundation for sustained success. They contend that blaming external factors or waiting for perfect conditions only delays progress indefinitely. However, critics rightfully point out that this perspective can oversimplify structural inequalities and systemic barriers. Not everyone faces equal obstacles, and emphasizing individual responsibility without acknowledging varying starting points can become tone-deaf. Access to capital, education, networks, and even basic stability differs dramatically across socioeconomic backgrounds. Additionally, some luck and timing inevitably influence outcomes regardless of execution quality. This concept fundamentally connects to wealth accumulation because consistent execution compounds results over time, while responsibility enables learning from failures rather than repeating them. It influences power dynamics by positioning individuals as active agents rather than passive recipients. Ultimately, freedom emerges from the financial independence and optionality that only sustained, responsible action can create, making execution and accountability not just important, but arguably essential components of upward mobility.